Our job is to gather facts and to evaluate those facts and to get at the truth. I have a very strong belief in facts and in truth, and that the facts will come out and the truth will come out eventually.
People that have been drawn into questioning the Foster case because of what's been published by Christopher Ruddy or the Washington Post, the Washington Times, may not be looking at the best evidence. The best evidence hasn't been reported. And people like Patrick Knowlton, his story hasn't been told.
On July 20th, 1993, I stopped into Fort Marcy Park at 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon. As soon as I pulled up into the lot, and it's a driveway, I think it's about 2/10 of a mile long. The first thing I saw when I pulled up was this rust brown, square-backed vehicle with an Arkansas license plate.
Patrick was on his way home from working a construction job in suburban Maryland, backed up in traffic, and he had to urinate. So he pulled into Fort Marcy Park to do that, and it was 4:30 p.m. That's Tuesday, July 20th. And he didn't know it, of course, at the time, but Vince Foster was dead at the time that Patrick pulled into the park. Patrick is a witness that could open up a very large can of worms. There are a lot of people who would just as soon see him no longer exist.
As I got up into where the actual level of the parking area was, I looked to my right, and there was a car parked there, a blue car. It was backed in. Because of the way the leaves were hitting the windshield, I couldn't tell if anybody was in either car at first. I just pulled up and I pulled into the right-hand side of this brown car. And as I put my car in park, I looked to the right, and the passenger window of this car that was backed in just came down, and there was this Hispanic or Middle Eastern, I wasn't really sure of his nationality, but there was this man, he just gave me this look.
Pat got out of his car and started to walk into the Fort Marcy Park to find the first large tree. And as he did, he heard the guy this guy who was parked open his car door. So Pat was a little bit nervous, and so he looked at this sign bordering Fort Marcy Park.
And then I just looked over my shoulder to the right, and I saw this guy. He just was leaning on his car and just staring at my head. Nothing else, is staring directly at my face. So I walk up this very wide path, and I went to the left. Now, I didn't know that Vince Foster's body was to the right at the time.
As he was on his way back, he heard the car door close, this man's car door. So he didn't know whether or not maybe the guy could be coming after him or if he'd gotten back in his car.
So I became very cautious, and as I approached the landing where you can see into the parking lot, I saw the brown Honda, my car, and I saw the blue car, and I didn't see this guy anywhere. So I thought, well, geez, maybe he's crouched down between the cars, or because he acted so strange, I was just suspicious of the guy. So I walked right towards the door, the driver's side of the brown Honda, using that as like a buffer, because I figured, it's just a little shield.
And he just happened to remember that the car was brown, and that it was an older brown Arkansas car. So as it turned out, that was pretty significant, because Mr. Foster's car was a silver car.
And as I cautiously walked around the back of the car, I looked and I saw that there was nobody crouched there, so I just had my keys in my hand. I just unlocked my door, got in the car, closed the door, and locked my door with my elbow, and I look over, and down comes the window again, and this guy just looks out at me, so I just start my car, and I back out, and I leave.
Patrick's account of what happened to him at the park is very important, because we know from the forensic evidence that Vincent Foster was dead by 4:30 when Patrick pulled into Fort Marcy Park. There were only 2 cars in the lot, neither of which belonged to Vincent Foster. So that's pretty important information. It just shoots the suicide in the park theory completely to shreds.
Patrick Knowlton is a crucial and pivotal witness in this case, and he was important to the authorities because at the very beginning, he did not see Mr. Foster's car at the park, and it was important for them to establish that he did.
This is CNN's Prime News.
The top stories this hour. In an apparent suicide, White House lawyer Vince Foster was found dead last night. President Clinton...
So I turned the TV on, and I kicked back, and 11 o'clock news comes on. The first thing on the news is, yesterday Vince Foster's body was found in Fort Marcy Park, and his body was discovered at 6 o'clock, and I was like, wow, I was there at 4:30, and his car was there. I saw this guy's car, this is what I'm thinking to myself, this White House guy.
So Patrick called the U.S. Park Police and reported what he had seen. And that was it. I mean, nobody came to see him, and he just reported what he had seen over the telephone. And then it was in April of 1994, so this is 9 months after Mr. Foster's death, that Patrick was contacted and interviewed by two FBI agents, Larry Monroe and William Columbell.
And towards the last 45 minutes of the interview, he opened his desk, and he pulled out some photographs, and I could tell they were Polaroids, and they were upside down, and he was sort of shuffling them as he talked to me. And I kept looking down to see what he was shuffling. And he said, "No, I want to talk about this car again."
And what they tried to do was they tried to get Patrick to admit that the car that he saw in the park could have been Mr. Foster's newer 1989 silver gray Honda. And it wasn't. It was, the car that Patrick saw was a brown car.
And then he starts flipping them all over, and he's saying to me, "Are you sure? Are you positive this is not the car you saw, the Arkansas license plate? Couldn't this have been the car? This could have been the car. Couldn't it have been?" He kept using all that terminology. He wanted me to say, "Well, it could have been." But I kept saying, "No, that wasn't the car with the Arkansas license plates. The car with the Arkansas license plate was older and brown and looked nothing like this car." And I said, "Is that Mr. Foster's car?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know, Mr. Knowlton. Didn't you see Mr. Foster's car?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, what did Mr. Foster's car look like?" And I said, "It was a brown, older car." And that's when I made the statement. It didn't look like a car an attorney would drive from, in my vision.
A lot of people, I think, could have been frightened away, or would have just rolled over and said, "Yes, that may have been the car I saw." And that's all the FBI wanted them to say, was that it might have been, it could have been a gray Honda, 1989. And most people might have just gone on with their lives, and the FBI would have been happy and satisfied that Foster's car was there at 4:30. But that didn't happen.
And finally I just said, I'm not going to change my story. This is what I saw. This is not the car I saw, and that's all I can say about it.
And then 18 months after that, so now we're talking 27 months after the death, in October of 1995, Patrick was contacted and interviewed by Ambrose Evans-Pritchard.
And I started telling him the story, and I was into about 5 minutes of it, and he interrupted me and said, "Are you telling me the truth?"
Ambrose was, at the time, the Washington, D.C. bureau chief for the London Sunday Telegraph.
And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm telling you the truth." He says, "Well, have you ever read your statements that when you gave them to the FBI?" And I said, "No."
When the FBI interviews you, it's just an interview report. It's not like a witness statement. The witness doesn't get to see it or initial it or sign it or anything like that.
I sat down in a chair in his office, and he handed me some papers that said FBI on top, and I started reading it. And I realized that I'm reading my stuff, my statements that are now typed up. I knew they were handwritten notes. Now it's typed up, and I'm reading it, and I'm saying, "Well, I didn't say that, and that's not true." And I'm saying this stuff out loud.
And an article appeared in the London Telegraph on Sunday the 22nd of October 1995, saying that Patrick was stunned when he saw these FBI interview reports, and that they contained outright lies.
But on the 21st, Ambrose called me on the phone and said, I'm doing an article for the newspaper, and I'm afraid it might jeopardize your life, possibly."
Now that article appeared in U.S. newsstands on Tuesday, October 24th, 1995.
So this article comes out, and then, of course, on Tuesday, we go down to the newsstand and pay the $6.95 for the Sunday Telegraph and open it up, and there is my name in print, which is the first time I've ever seen anything like it, and this story about how I said the FBI lied, how Ken Starr never called me before his grand jury, or Ken Starr never interviewed me. And the picture of the guy that I saw in the park, Ambrose said, "Could this be the murder?" There's a picture of Hillary and Vince Foster and my name, and I'm just like, it was sort of surreal, and I was like, why would a guy write a story like this? But as I read the story, it was all true. Once I was able to accept that, it was a newspaper article that was in another country, then I wasn't so worried about that. Well, who's going to see this, And lo and behold, Ken Starr and his crew obviously were monitoring Ambrose Evans-Pritchard's articles.
That day, the Office of Independent Counsel, Mr. Starr's office, prepared a subpoena for Patrick to testify before the Whitewater grand jury the following week, Wednesday, November 1st.
The person who served me the subpoena was Russell Bransford, who was an FBI agent who had worked for Robert Fisk, worked for Ken Starr, and possibly was involved in the 16-day police investigation, the initial investigation. I'm not sure of that, but if I took a good guess, I would say he probably was.
This was, of course, a secret subpoena. These grand jury proceedings are secret. No one knows about them except for the FBI and the Office of Independent Counsel. So Patrick received his subpoena on Thursday mornings a little after 10 a.m. From Agent Bransford, Russell Bransford. And Bransford gave Patrick his business card and said, if you have any problems, give me a call. So beginning that same day, Patrick was harassed on the streets of Washington.
On October 26, 1995, after I was served the subpoena by Russell Bransford, I called my girlfriend on the phone and I complained to her about being subpoenaed, and I was, pretty overwhelmed by that. I just thought, this is so ridiculous. What do they want me for, Catherine and I were walking down to DuPont Circle, and we were crossing this intersection of New Hampshire Avenue and 20th Street, and I look up, and there's a guy about 20 feet away maybe, and he's just got his face locked right on my head. I mean, his eyes are locked on my head. And I look up and I look back down, and we get closer. I look up, he's still staring right at me. This is very blank, cold-looking stare. Not blinking his eyes or not squinting, just like staring. And as he walks past us, he turns his head and continues to stare at me. And I look, while I'm watching him, he just keeps walking and staring at me. So we stop in the middle of the block. And we looked back, and the guy was standing on the corner. He still looked back, still looking back at me, and he raised his wrist and he talked into his shirt sleeve. So we turn, and we start walking down the sidewalk, and as soon as we start walking, there's a guy walking directly toward me. Now he's doing the same thing. Expressionless but cold kind of look, just staring right at my head. At about this point here, the man cut to my left, he walked by me. We stopped to get in the road, the sidewalk, and we turned back to look, and this guy crossed over the street, and the other guy, the first guy we ran into, was at the first corner waiting for the light to change, is what we thought. They both been on that corner, they exchanged some words, and then they walked on. Now DuPont Circle, and I don't know if I should be saying this or not, because I don't want to make any kind of disparaging remarks, but it's a gay community of Washington. And I said to Catherine, geez, I must look pretty good tonight. And that was just a little joke that, these guys are staring at me, maybe I do look good tonight. So we sort of laugh, and as we turn again to start walking, a guy comes, I don't even know where this guy, actually I don't even know where this guy, if he was standing behind a pole or what he was standing behind a pillar, this guy just comes out of nowhere and walks on my right-hand side and just glares at my face. And this guy's looking a little bit angrier than anybody else was. He walked onto my right-hand side and brushed my shoulder as he walked by. And again, this gentleman had his locked-eyed stare on me. And as he walked by me, he just turned his face and continued to stare at me as he walked by. The fifth guy, again, followed us down to the street corner. And as we approached the street corner on our street, there was the sixth guy standing there. The sixth guy was another big guy. He was sort of standing at ease as we approached the corner. And this is when I thought, well, and there's hardly anybody on the street, by the way. It's not very crowded. And I'm thinking to myself, now this is getting a little peculiar. Now I realize that these people really are staring at me. It's not my imagination. And as we approach the corner, this guy is standing in an at ease position, and he sort of swings himself around in a military stance as we reach the corner. And he's just staring down at me, and I look over at him, he's a 6'6" guy. And he's staring down at me, and I said to Catherine, let's cross the street.
Most of these men were approaching Patrick and following him and staring at him before his predecessor had stopped. So it's back to back to back to back. Very, very strange. So we talked to, eventually, I've talked to a number of experts who are familiar with this technique of intimidation. And what they said was, well, yeah, they're familiar with it. It's used by federal intelligence and investigative agencies. And what it does is it has two objects, two purposes. Number one, it warns the witnesses and scares the witnesses and intimidates the witness. And if that doesn't work and the witness continues to tell the truth about whatever it is that they've seen, it will discredit him. I mean, who's going to believe somebody who says that every time he leaves his building, there are strange men on every street corner following him and staring at him? And particularly from a witness who said that back on July 20th of 1993, there was a man in the parking lot who was staring at him. I mean, it just sounds like a nut.
The guy was right on my tail. He's right behind me, so then we started walking a little quicker. We started picking up our pace a little bit, because now I'm nervous. Now I know something's going on, and I'm feeling very uptight. And so we start crossing the street. This guy starts walking right behind me. I mean, like right on my heels. And now my heart's starting to pump a little bit, and I'm feeling a little nervous. And I turn around, and this guy is like, I'm not kidding you, he's like leaning over me as we're walking, and I'm picking up our pace. Now Catherine's getting very upset. She's holding on to me tighter and tighter. And on our left-hand side, there's just another guy pacing back and forth as we're approaching. My heart's racing, my legs are feeling rubbery. I'm actually getting pretty sick to my stomach. Catherine gets very upset. But I grabbed Catherine and we ran across Connecticut Avenue, which is a very busy street. It was like a scene out of a movie. I mean, it was just unbelievable. We get in the median strip and I think, okay, now we're gonna get across the street. All the bad guys are behind us wherever they are. Now Catherine is starting to get a little weepy. She's getting very upset because it becomes very real. And as we get ready to cross the street where there's no cars coming, I see in the corner another guy standing there. And he's just staring at me, and I'm thinking, this is impossible. How can they be all over the place here? This is not real. And I realize at this point, this road's getting dark. It's too dark. There's no street lights. And I'm just like, this is not good. Let's not go down there. I said to Catherine, let's not go down there. So as I turn around to start heading back, the guy who crossed the street was right here behind us, and he was right on top of us, and I started to panic. Now Catherine, of course, was holding back tears, so I turn around, and as we turn around to walk back, he turns around and walks right next to Catherine and maintains the same pace walking that we are. If we slow down, he slows down. If we speed up, he speeds up. And the whole time we're walking, this guy's just looking over. Look, there's Catherine, who's 5'5", and he's looking over her head and just staring at me the whole time we're walking. So finally, we just started running. I didn't care about traffic like I don't right now. I just went right across the street. A car comes up on the left-hand side of us and sort of paces our walk. Now at that point, I mean, not only were my legs rubbery back at number 7, 8, and 9, but my stomach, I mean, I'm feeling euphoric. I mean, I really am at this time, and this may sound insane to some people, but I feel like my soul's leaving my body. Now, as we get about to this point, the guy walks around to the back of his car. Now, there's no vehicles parked here. It's just his is parked in the middle. I see him go to the back of his car, and he opens his trunk up, and he pulls something out of his trunk. And I sort of hesitate, because I'm thinking, again, this guy's got a gun. And the whole time he's in his trunk, he's turning back and he's looking at us. He's watching us standing where we are. Nothing felt safe. That's one thing about this, this harassment. It really hits you deep. You end up questioning yourself, and that's what it is. You end up questioning yourself, and that loses your confidence. I realized that's the technique they used, and it was to make you question yourself, your own sanity, in a very short period of time.
It's terrifying. It's like something out of the Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock. It's really scary. You know, a lot of the movies we see today, they always have like these terrorists are the bad guys, and the FBI are the good guys that save us. But if you ever turn that upside down, can you think of a more horrifying movie than if the FBI agents were evil and they were terrorizing the citizens and the press was going along with it? That's scary.
Finally, after being harassed Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I didn't go anywhere on Sunday. On Monday, this has gone for 4 days now, Russell Bransford finally calls me on the phone at 10 o'clock and he says, "Oh, I heard you had a little trouble over the weekend. You want to tell me about it?" And I'm like, absolutely. I said, we called you, we called Ken Starr's office, nobody responded. And he had nothing to say about that. He said, "Well, I'd like to come over and talk to you right now." And I said, "No, if I'm going to talk to you, I want to have my attorney present." "Well, you don't need an attorney to talk to me."
It wasn't until much later, at least, maybe a week or so later, that we were, trying to figure out what was going on, and I really couldn't figure it out. I could not figure it out because I thought that this is not part of a cover-up. I just thought that that's just too incredible. That there would be a cover-up of Vince Foster's death, because I knew that the Park Police had investigated it. I thought that the Congress had investigated it, and it was being investigated by Ken Starr's office, and Ken Starr certainly has a stellar reputation by way of integrity. So I thought, well, it just can't be a cover-up.
Hung the phone up. I went to look for John's telephone number, and I had his card for his office. I got his card, found his number, picked up my phone, There was no dial tone. There was no, I mean, my phone was as dead. I was like, what is, so I went to my other phone, picked it up, and it was completely dead. Ding dong, my phone, my doorbell rings. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's John, because I left a message one point for him. And I go to the door, open the door, and there's the FBI agent. I said, what are you doing up here? He goes, well, you know, I was just in the neighborhood. And I said, well, wherever you called me from, did you hang the phone up? I said, my phone's not working. So he walks right into my apartment, and he goes over to my phone and picks it up. And I never really thought about, he knew exactly where my phone was. Goes over, picks up my phone, and, oh, that's dead, all right, that's dead. And he went over to my other phone and picked it up. Oh, yeah, that's dead. You know, if we had anything to do with this, you'd never know it. If we were tapping your lines or anything like that, you would never know it. Then he hangs the phone up, and he unbuttons his coat. He throws his coat open, and I see his sidearm, you know, and he sits down, and he says, like this kind of thing. He says, oh, tell me about this problem he had over the weekend.
Among other things, the American people have been told is that 3 separate entities have investigated this case, or 4 separate entities if you include Congress. They say, well, first the park police concluded suicide in the park, and then the Fisk probe concluded suicide in the park, and then the Starr probe included suicide in the park. Well, what they're missing is the common denominator in all 3 of those investigations, and that is the FBI.
And all the time I'm telling him the story, he's just sitting there smiling at me. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm telling him this story that scared the life out of me, and he's staring at me. And I finally just stopped telling him the story. After, I'm serious, 40 minutes I talked to this guy. And I finally said to him, you know, what's your deal? What are you smiling about? He said, well, I'm going to tell you this, Mr. Knowlton. That article that was in the newspaper, you know, I worked with Larry Monroe and William Collin Bell. I worked with them in the Fisk investigation, and I'm working with them in the Starr investigation. And I said, well, then, Agent Bransford, can I trust you? Can I be trusting you? And he leaned right over into my face and said, Mr. Knowlton, I don't know. That's a very good question.
As to why it is that the press won't cover it, I don't know. I really don't understand it. In fact, I didn't believe that they wouldn't cover it. I thought that eventually they would if I just gave them enough evidence of what it was that was going on. But then it finally sort of dawned on me, and I sort of learned the hard way, that they're not going to cover it no matter what it is that we give to them. And when I learned that was on October 10th, of 1997. That was when Ken Starr's report was released. And it was released with 20 pages, which I authored, which the 3-judge panel ordered Mr. Starr to attach over his objection to his own report. Now, in that 20 pages, it's an 11-page letter and then excerpts from 25 federal government records proving 5 separate points of a cover-up. Now, this is the first time in the history of the independent counsel statute that an independent counsel was ordered to attach evidence of a cover-up by his own investigators to his own report. And if they're not going to recover that, there's pretty much, that sort of says it all. I feel like I could have a video of the body being dragged through the park and they wouldn't cover that.
At this point, the American press has a vested interest in not reporting this story, not telling the public about Patrick Knowlton. Whether courts rule in his favor or against him, they're not going to tell the public. They don't want the public to know about Patrick Knowlton or what he saw at Fort Marcy Park. The press, at this point, will look bad.
Now, if the truth surfaces, their credibility is going to take a very, very major hit. They have been reporting suicide in the park, no foul play, for the last 6.5 years, beginning before the first official investigation was even closed.
It took me a long time to realize it, but the perpetrators, it's so sloppy, and there's so much evidence laying around. For someone, if you go out and pick it up and look at it, there's so much evidence of this cover-up. It's all over the place. And I think you can only be that sloppy and leave that much evidence out there if you have confidence that the press is not going to report it.
When you start to get into the case, you find that every single point in the Office of Independent Counsel's report on the Vince Foster case, I mean, every one of them is untrue. There's not one single point that the Starr report makes that can withstand scrutiny when compared with the underlying federal investigative record in the case.
Whether or not Mr. Foster was depressed is really not relevant, because the physical evidence of the case shows that the man did not take his own life. The blood on his shoulder and the fact that his car wasn't at the park and so many other things that that whether or not he was depressed or not really doesn't matter. Depressed people can be killed.
If you prove cover-up in this case, you prove some other things that are really much more important, very important for, I think, all of us to know. Because if you prove cover-up, you prove not only that there's government corruption, but the Office of Independent Counsel, Mr. Starr's office, and now Mr. Wray's office, is infected with the very corruption that is designed to expose and prosecute. It also proves that we can't rely on the Congress to exercise oversight over the executive. And that's something that we all, sort of take for granted. And also, it tells us, I think probably most importantly, and maybe most shockingly, or at least to me, is that we can't rely on the press to report the facts of these cases, even or the existence of cover-ups, even when they're obvious, even when we've already proved them. They're just not going to cover it.
They'll focus all the attention on Monica Lewinsky or some other issue, O.J. Simpson. The public is all looking at all the noise and all the action, or they talk about how the Democrats, Republicans are really going at it, and you got James Carville battling with Ken Starr, and it appears that this is where the real action is, but it's not. It's the big noise and motion covering up the little motion. And when people are looking up here at this hand that's moving, they don't see what my other hand is doing. And that's what the press does. And they do it very well. It's a lot like a wrestling match, too, because it looks like they're fighting. There's a lot of adversarial thing. It looks like there's a liberal media and a conservative media, and you got Limbaugh on one side. But you never hear Limbaugh talk about Patrick Knowlton.
We rely in this country on our press, our news media, to keep government honest, and they're not doing it. And it's our separate democratic institutions are not functioning as they were intended, as the founding fathers intended. They're supposed to be exercising oversight over one another. They're supposed to be pursuing different interests. They're really not. They're really pursuing the same interest, and that is credibility.
Now the whole thing's going to unravel because of Mr. Knowlton. Everything's coming apart because the whole conspiracy to cover up the facts is coming apart, and the role of the press from the very beginning is coming apart.
I'm just an average citizen. All I did was I called the police when I thought that something was wrong. I did what I thought was my civic duty by coming forward and talking to the FBI. I did what I thought was right by going and talking to a journalist. And I also did what I thought was right by going before the grand jury. And all this stuff, it just, caved in my little world that I lived in, and it's devastating.
Well, what's the lesson that people learn from what Patrick Knowlton did? I think the lesson, or the possible lessons, are that if you know something and it doesn't go along with whatever it is that the FBI wants you to say, change your story and keep your mouth shut.
I've certainly made some enemies by doing what I've done, because I'm dealing with people who are covering up a murder, and people that cover up murder are not very nice people. And I don't think about it a lot, but I'm sure there's some risk involved. But given the choice of uncovering the murder and helping Patrick and taking that risk, I'd rather do that than just go along. I don't want to go along with murder, and I don't want to go along with lies, and I don't want to go along with a press that's not truthful and just pretend that it's okay. I know too much now to turn around and go back. I couldn't live a life that was false.
We've proved the case. I mean, we haven't even issued one subpoena, and we've already proved cover-up.
It's all documented now. We've pulled all the pieces of the puzzle together and put them in a bound volume. And if it hadn't been for Mr. Knowlton, I don't think the truth would have come out.